Once again, like I said, respectful of everybody's time and knowing that if they come in, they can do that. But
we all got to get through a pile of laundry.
That's right. We all got to get through a pile of laundry that's been building up all week. So just to kind of reiterate what Pastor Sarah said, so my name is Scott DeGraff. I work for Thriving Financial, but I've been a member here for 16 plus years. I am on the Stewardship Committee. And just wanted to kind of just touch base with you guys about different ways to be able to be generous within the church, but also some different things that we've seen that have changed over the last couple of years, especially with everything going on with COVID. And I don't know if you guys have heard of the Secure Act 2.0, but there's actually been a couple of changes with that as well that I just want to kind of touch base with. That'll be part of the presentation today. And definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and let me know if you can't hear me or anything like that. Okay. So really, what I wanted to present and what Pastor Sarah had reached out to me about is just how do we become generous not only with our money but also with our time and our efforts. Right. I mean, generosity isn't just about giving money. Okay. And so kind of some of the things that we're going to talk about is just what kind of legacy can we live, not only for the church, but in their family, but also with charity. So there are many different ways that we can give of that, whether it be resources, whether it be your time, whether it be giving of gifts. There are different things, you hear cars for kids, right? It's spelled with a K, right? You hear that on your radio. So so there are different ways that obviously in society that we can give of our time and of our efforts. And so we just want to bring those to light as easy as we can and be very conscious of those. But giving is when you give your time or you give different things, it's inspired by whether it be God or whether it be the values that you have. I mean, I really think it ties into what Pastor Sarah was saying today, which is the values that you hold inside of you. If family is one of the top values that you have, you probably give a lot of yourself to your kids, your grandkids, your relatives, or the family that you choose, right? The friends that you hold around you. So giving of your time and giving of your efforts and your gifts that you can provide, whether it be monetarily or others. So there again, speaking to time and talents, obviously we give around to, when we think of our time or our talents, we give to our sister church in Guatemala. But those different ways or the ways that we give around the church for generosity, we look at financial assets, so donations or giving strategies. So when we talk about that, when Thrivent talks about that, and not that this is all about Thrivent, but obviously Thrivent helped provide some of the stuff we're talking about today. There are ways to give that will make it very advantageous for the church as well as for you, especially as we get older down the line. Because one of the two things that everybody always says that is inevitable: death and taxes, right? So we all, death is going to happen, taxes are going to happen. The government's going to get part of their money. And so one of the things, and this is kind of where the Secure Act falls into play and when generosity falls into play, is that how can we, if it's something that you want to give back to the church, and you want to give of your money, of those assets that you have, how can I give to them so that it's beneficial to both sides? Okay. So how can I give so that if I give $1,000, I don't have to pull out $1,200 or $2,000 to give $1,000 or to give that. There are different ways. I don't know how many people have heard of QCDs. Who's heard of QCDs? Raise your hand. Okay, good. Okay. For those that don't know what a QCD is, called a qualified charitable distribution. Okay. So a qualified charitable distribution is something where you can give of your assets, so of your money that you have in your bank account that's in a pre-qualified retirement account. You can give, and it'll be tax-free. It goes to the charity tax-free. Now, with that said, when we give to the church and you're under the age of 70, you give to the church, that usually is coming from your savings account. You've already taken taxes out of that. Well, once you hit 70 and a half, that's a way that the government, not so much said this, but they put this into law that you can actually give money from your retirement account without having to pay taxes on that money. Okay, so there again, if we can, if you can give to the church essentially 15 to 22% more because you do it the right way, the church benefits more and you don't have to pay taxes on that money. Does that make sense? Okay. When you get older, you get, now that this is another new rule change in 2023, the RMDs have changed from 72 to 73. Who knows what an RMD is? Right? Okay, so an RMD is a required minimum distribution. All that means is it means that if you've done a really good job of saving and you've done a really good job of putting money into your 401k or to an IRA, all the pre-tax money, when you hit 73 now, you have to start taking money out. The government says, I'm getting my money no matter what. Okay, they're going to take taxes out. You have to take out 4% no matter what. So one way of being able to take care of part of your RMD or maybe all of your RMD is to do a qualified charitable distribution when you hit 72 or 73 now. It gives to the church or gives to your favorite charity. You don't write a check, you actually put it as part of that, and it allows you to give without paying taxes on that money. Okay, so once again, if you were like, hey, normally I give $2,500 a year to the church, right? I give $200 a month to the church. You give normally $200 a month to the church and you're like, hey, I'm 70 and a half. I don't want to have to take from my savings account. I might as well start taking some money out of my retirement account that's not been taxed yet. You can set up a QCD. You can give to the church and you truly could give $2,400 that hasn't been taxed yet, where if you were to take it out and put it in your savings account, you would pay taxes on that money and be considered income. Does that make sense? A little bit? So obviously when we're looking at being generous, there are different ways obviously that you can be generous with the values giving model. So how do we express that? So spontaneous giving. So what do you think spontaneous giving is?
Right out of your wallet.
Coming right out of your wallet, right? So you're right. You came in for Easter Sunday. You had your normal charity, that your normal tithing that you give, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I got an extra $15 in my pocket. I put it in there. Okay, the church isn't counting on it, or the charity isn't counting on it, but it's something where you're all of a sudden, hey, that happened. Or tax season. That's right. We're right in the middle of tax season. So taxes, your refund. If you get a refund, if you're lucky enough to have a refund, that comes back, and you know what? I wasn't really prepared for. I was prepared for maybe $1,500, but I wasn't prepared for $3,000. Maybe I'm gonna give some of that back. So that's a spontaneous, charitable distribution or charity giving. Okay, where you just decide, hey, I'm just gonna do that. I think another way of being a charitable spontaneous would be you come to church on our wonderful winters that we have, and it just happens to be snowing. And you know what? You got here a little early, and you realize, you know what? The shovel's sitting right there. The sidewalk is a little bit slippery. I'm gonna go take the shovel. I'm gonna go shovel the sidewalk and be generous that way. Spontaneously being charitable, right? Go your time. Then we look at intentional giving. So this is something where really intentionally you are looking at, how am I fitting it into my budget, right? So I know with Arch, with Grace here, we have different ways of being able to give. You can have the envelopes that come in the mail that say, hey, we get give each week. However you want to do that. We also have a way. We have a QR code. Right, you've seen the QR codes. You can literally just take a picture of it. You can log in. You can give of your money that way. You can also set it up so it literally comes out kind of like if you pay, like we pay our mortgage once a month, but it automatically comes out. You can do it that way too. You set it up so it automatically comes out. So you don't have to worry about, did I bring a checkbook today on Sunday, or did I forget my phone so I can't take a picture of the QR code. So there again, it's setting up something for intentionally giving of what you have budgeted for for the future, for whether it be to this point when you look at this, your church, your work, nonprofits, your alma mater, charities. So then we look at plan giving. So plan giving is really as we get further down the line. So now we're getting further into, we're getting closer to retirement, or we're in retirement. We're starting to look at how can we make a difference with all different kind of sets within our lives. Okay. And by that, I mean, you know, as much as we talk about it, we're at church right now and it's really, hey, we're just gonna focus here. But I think being aware of all these three things when you're looking at setting yourself up for your future, setting your families up for the future, and what you want to do with your money so that you can live and leave a legacy that you want. A lot of people, when we sit down and talk with people, we start talking about, you know, if you're a beneficiary and you, unfortunately, if you have a family member that passed away and they give you money, one of the first things we ask them is we say, what would your mom have wanted you to do with this money? Some would say, well, my mom really was, you know, charitable-minded, and she would have wanted me to take some of this money, use it for myself so that I can pay off some bills. But she would also have wanted some of this money because she did really well for herself to have gone towards a charity of her choice or your choice. So it's helping people set up ways to use the money that they have to benefit their values. Okay, their values in life. And I think the biggest thing that we try to do, and I try to help with people, is that when you get to the distribution phase of retirement and legacy, even a legacy, is that being aware of how you want your legacy to be thought of. Now, we have different things within our church that are out there. You know, there's endowment funds that are out there that are growing, we use for scholarships. There are different things that we use to help people get to different places. You know, we do giving where we fund trips for the youth, for all different things, all different aspects within our church. But I think if you are aware of the small things that we can do for tweaks to make your dollar go a little bit further, that's where we can make an impact. And I think sometimes people are like, well, a 5% impact or a 10% impact. And I'm like, a 10 or 15% impact on $10,000 or on $100,000 is $15,000. So if we can turn around and look at it and say, hey, I want to leave my kids $500,000 and I still have $300,000 in an IRA and I really want to leave the church $100,000. I don't know if anybody knows this, but if you put one of your beneficiaries to an IRA, so it's pre-tax, right? Your 401k or IRA is pre-tax, so it has no tax hit. If you leave a beneficiary, you set it up that it would go to a church or a charity, that $100,000 is fully $100,000 going to the church or charity, and they don't pay taxes on it. So think about that. If you left that $100,000 to your kids, they're probably going to pay 30 to 35% of taxes on that money, possibly. Okay, at least probably 22. So how can we make that money that you've worked hard for? It has grown for you, and you want to leave a legacy for your kids, but also for the church. How can we make it so that you can leave that legacy and reduce, being tax efficient, reduce those taxes that we have on that money? Because this money, it should go as long as it should, right? I mean, I'm not against the government at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. But if I can reduce the taxes that I have to pay on my money that I've worked for and reduce the taxes on other people's money that they've worked for, and they can still get what they want to accomplish, whether it be for giving or for leaving a legacy for their kids, that's what I try to do, and that's what we wanted. That's what I want. Part of why I want to talk to you guys today. So there are different ways that we can do it. Now, this is just obviously very high level, but it's really something where my passion is to try to help people live the life that they're living, not only now, because we're not all 1 foot in the grave, right? We still want to live, and this money, your money is to be used, but let's use it the most effective way we can, efficiently. And so there are different ways that we want to do this and try to build those ways. And that's why Pastor Sarah wanted me to come talk to you guys today, is because, there's a saying that we have when he talks about QCDs: friends don't let friends write checks. And you're like, wait a second, what does that mean? Well, for the QCD side of things, when you hit 70.5, if you write a check and then give it to them and say, well, I want to use that as my QCD this year, As soon as you took this distribution and put that in your own account and then you're going to give it to the church, you've already paid taxes on that money. But if you set it up correctly and you say, hey, I want the IRA to literally send me a check that's going to the church, or you're going to set up so it goes to the church and it's not a check that's coming to you with your name on it, it will be considered QCD. You won't pay taxes on it. You'll take the distribution, and that $1,500, $2,000, $5,000, whatever you want, will be truly $5,000. Okay. So a couple of different things that we just want to go over here near the end, just to kind of keep going with things, is that planning misconceptions. So you need to be rich or old or both to give, right? I don't think that's the truth, right? This is something for everybody. I mean, obviously, we want to give of as much as we can of our gifts and of ourselves. So you don't have to, there's no set age. I mean, that's why I love when they have for the kids that they bring up change that maybe they've had in the past, so that they have accumulated and they want to give, because that's what they can give, right? They're giving, my kids get a salary, a little allowance. They get when they do things, right? But having them give $1 or having them give some of their change, that is essentially maybe 5%, 10% of what they get per week. So being able to give that, it'll reduce what I leave for my heirs. There again, this is where if you plan around things, you can actually set things up with different ways, whether it be through trusts or through insurance, life insurance, that you can actually leave your heirs with as much as you want them to have and still be allowed to give two different ways. I can't change it once my plans are made. That's where you get into the trust, where you get into talking to lawyers, irrevocable trust versus the irrevocable trust. Those are things that are really still high level that if you're interested, that can be talked about with too. And then just automatically happens when I die, right? Oh, yep. Well, when I die, the church is going to get some money, or I'm just going to give it to my kid. Well, if it's not set up the correct way, beneficiaries are not set up the correct way, it will go through probate. It will take a long time. And so there are different things that just to be aware of as you're setting things up. So plan giving features. So when you start looking at planning things, there are different things obviously that we can talk about that we kind of talked about already, but obviously you can be able to give more, you can give an asset other than cash. There again, that's when we start talking about, whether it be cars or whether it be property or even stocks for that matter. Looking at, creating opportunities to involve family and other future generations, ensuring your kids with grandkids have options for receiving income payments, and maybe it'll take some tax benefits, and that's where we talked a little bit about that with the QCDs, R&Ds, and making sure that dollar goes the longest way possible. So kind of wrapping it up here, obviously we talk about when we look at generosity, it's not only just gifts of cash, but we also talk about our ways of helping with our time. Obviously beneficiaries will be there, charitable gift annuities, which is way, that's out there, that's a whole nother time and topic. Charitable trust, donor advisor funds, which is something where you're like, hey, I want to give to a charity, but I don't know, I've given to my church, but I have more time or more things that I want to give to other places, but I don't know exactly which ones yet. You actually can set it up so they just go into a fund where it goes towards a charity, but it just kind of sits and it grows, but it gives you that tax advantage. And then we have the will and trust. There's a pretty lady that we got somebody that smiled for me yesterday. No, not yesterday. This just gets into a couple different examples, and we don't need to go through that. But to this point, it's really about what you guys want, how you guys want your gifts and your tithes and your talents to be able to be utilized for the church, and for your life and for your family. When you set things up the correct way, you can make sure that your gifts are utilized the best they can, not only at whatever age you are, whether you're 25 years old or whether you're 75 years old. But we want to make sure we take advantage of everything that we can. I'm not a CPA, so we give tax recommendations, we can't give tax advice. But if we can set things up the correct way, we can work within the system to help maximize your dollar, be efficient with your money, and be able to do the things that you want for the church. Because there's a lot of people to that point, that one slide that said you have to be, what did it say? We have to be old, you have to be rich, and you have to be able to give, right? Or both, right? And so it's like, that's not the truth. If things are set up the correct way, you can work within a budget, you can work within things to make sure that if we get to that point where we get to the end of our life, that the church can benefit a ton from things that they have done for you, that your family can still benefit from that way, and that we can make sure that it's being tax efficient when it comes to utilizing those assets for you now and in the future, and then for leaving that legacy. What questions do you guys have? Yeah.
Well, we had Becky Palmgren here, you probably remember, who is a regional planner for the ELCA.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that she talked about was, besides, like you talked high level about, there's, other things like charitable trusts and all these donor advised funds, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's also the ability to name like the ELCA Foundation, and I think there's something equivalent from Thrivent that if they're like a beneficiary of those IRA funds,
Right,
that it would go, but then you can have an agreement with that entity, that foundation that says, but I want up to like maybe 10 different other entities to get part of this, like Grace Lutheran Church, like whatever you've got listed. So does Thrivent have that too?
they do. Yeah. So, and that's really, it's a good question. And what they're starting to do is they're starting to see that, people are wanting to be, they want to give, they want to use that. They want to use that tax, we'll call tax write-off, that ability to give to charities, but they're like, I don't know exactly which ones I want to go to. And so that's where it comes in. And to your point of that donor fund, that's what that essentially is. And so Thrivent has that where you can set it up to say, hey, I want to give $50,000 of this, and I want it to continue to grow, but I don't know exactly who I want to give it to when I eventually has to go, when I pass on. But I know, number one, it's going to be, Grace Lutheran. Number two, I want to give to whatever charity that you can think of. But yes, they do have that. It's just a matter of then setting that up so that you can have it be specific, so that as you go, you can be like, hey, this charity, this charity, this charity, and I want 10% here, 10% there. You can actually set it up too, where like an endowment fund, where you're like, hey, I want to give $100,000 to Grace, and I want to, of that $100,000, we're going to put it into a fund that grows tax free, and it will turn around and give out every year an $8,000 scholarship or a $10,000 scholarship. So it's essentially like an endowment, but it grows. So if you're getting an 8% return on that money, you're giving out an income every year that way. So yes. To your point, it's a very long answer, but yes, they do have that. So that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and then I wonder, well, then how do you distinguish if you've got those capabilities through different entities like Thrivent or through the ELCA? Then how do you weigh which is best for you? I mean, what are those factors?
I think for the most part, it's really about the trust that you have within the person that you're dealing with.
Okay.
If you feel comfortable, I mean, everybody sitting in here knows that you've made decisions about big purchases, small purchases, whatever, because of emotion, right? And when you went and bought your car, or when you go out to dinner, you realize you're at whatever part you are in your life, you decide, hey, I'm going to buy that steak. I'm going to pay $25, even though you're like, ooh, geez, $25 for a steak, okay. But yet the next time you go to that same place, you may only spend $15 to go buy that steak. So it's really about trust and your relationship that you have with the person that you're dealing with. And so which one is better? Everybody has very similar or the same products. It's just a matter of who you trust. And then number two, some of them will have a few different more options in it. And I think just finding out what options specifically they are. And there again, I don't have it in front of me right now, otherwise I would tell you exactly how that works. But it's something that if you do have questions about it and want to get more information, you know, feel free. I can at least give you some of our information so that you can make at least have more to that point to be able to make decisions that way. That makes sense. So, but yeah, money is emotional. Just like our church, you have a relationship with our church, we have a relationship with, you know, whether you have an advisor, whether you don't have an advisor, but you have a relationship with your work, you have a relationship with the place that is taking care of your 401k or whoever or whatever it is. And so if you don't feel comfortable with that, you're going to not feel comfortable as you grow towards the future when it comes to giving, when it comes to leaving a legacy. And so those are things that, you know, I strongly advise you just to try to find somebody that you trust to make help you get educational decisions. My clients, I don't sit here and say, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. We give recommendations off of what we feel of what their values are. I mean, there again, not to keep going back to Pastor Sarah's values, but we take values tests when we come into the profession, and you make decisions on your money for your values. Okay. So when it comes right down to it, when you guys, when you retire, or even before you retire, you're making decisions about what you're going to spend your money on and what you're going to do. It's because of the values you have, whether it be the family, so you go on family trips, whether it be a car because you want to have a nice car to get you to and from work because you got to drive 40 miles every day. Those are the things that we just wanted to bring to you to say, hey, if church is a huge part of your life and you want to have, want to be generous, what are ways that we can maximize your dollar, but minimize the effects that you have on your pocketbook, so that maybe you can give an extra 5% this year because, hey, I did it with a QCD, or I set it up so that it comes in this way. Those different things are stuff that we try to help with any way we can. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
Is your decision today grandfathered in by the government?
Decision today, explain.
Okay. Like you make a decision to make tax-free distributions, okay? And all of a sudden the government says, we're gonna
they change it 5 years from now.
Yeah, we're gonna
if it's in effect today. So let's say you decide to do the QCDs today, you start doing that. And then 5 years from now, they say, hey, sorry, we're getting rid of QCDs. Too many people are taking advantage of this and we're not getting our tax money. You've made a decision right now, they can't undo it. You are grandfathered in.
you are grandfathered in.
Yep.
No matter what the IRS says.
Correct. As long as you have done it, well, see, now you're holding me to something that in 5 years you'd be like, hey, this can't go on. From what we've been told, anything that like 2 years ago when things changed, if you would like, I'll use this example. If you have $22 million, you have 23, there's a higher income, there's a tax that you have to give for a legacy tax to pass on money. Okay. They're changing that to $11 million in the state of Minnesota. But if you do it now, you get locked into a trust that's at $22 million and it changes, it's locked in. So your grandfather did. So to your point, if you do something now that's giving you tax-free distributions for the future, QCD or something like that, and it's in law today, you can go back to 2023 and say, hey, if in 2028 they change it, you come back to that and say, no, I get grandfathered in. From what I'm aware, that's what we were told. But in 5 years, they'll come beat me up. And if they come back and they say, well, you're not that one thing that you did is not grandfathered in. Everybody else's is, but that one isn't. Then you come hold me to it.
If you look what the government is trying to do, you're not grandfathered in.
Well, and that's what we're trying to, and that's what we just try to be as up to date and be as educational as we can so that people are aware. Right. So if we could help with changes and help you make better decisions as we go, that's what we try to do as best we can. So I would hope that they would hold themselves to it, but there again, we all know that can change. Question over here.
Yeah, I have a kind of an off the wall question about I'm just gonna poll people in the room here. Do you think of your assets as dollars or as numbers?
Oh, I don't get it.
Well,
understand your question.
there's no change of dollars in the transactions that occur in our lives these days. It's just numbers on paper. But those numbers have meaning, of course. I'm not minimizing that. But there are times when I think, well, those are dollars that I have, but it's just numbers right now. Just what everybody else thinks about that.
Does everybody understand what he's saying? So pretty much what he's saying is this. Very rarely, and this is very rare that I have this was a tournament for my kids. So I actually have cash. So cash has been the big thing. So you kind of value cash a lot. Numbers, do we value numbers as much? So you see in your 401k, it's been going this way, right? Now it's coming back, But he's today, do you value those numbers as much as you value cash in your pocket? Is that kind of what you, I mean?
Yeah.
How you think?
Just the way of thinking about
Correct.
situations that you're involved in.
Yep.
It doesn't change anything, it's just how you think about it.
It doesn't, but I think the biggest thing with that is that do you value making sure you're aware of the numbers that are in your account that's maybe in your 401k, in your IRA, and having it so that it will like value that money. Don't take it and say, hey, that's just 10%, it's not a big deal, right?
Told you it's off the wall stuff, so.
Is there another question back there? Yes.
If you have a straight investment account,
Yeah.
Is there a way to make charitable donations from that? Where there's like no minimum required, it says, to avoid capital gains.
To avoid capital gains.
Or take that, yeah.
That's where, that's a good question. So it's obviously post-tax, so it's non-qualified, right? So it's liquid cash right now. To avoid the, you know what, as of right now, I would say no, but that's where, if you are like, hey, I want to start something that would do something like that, that's where that charitable advisor fund comes into play, where you're like, hey, I want to start putting, I don't know exactly where I want this to go eventually, but I know I want to do a charity, whether it goes to the church or whether it goes to, any other charity of your choice. But that's the way to start looking at, so that when the money does come out, it goes tax-free to that person, with that charity. So, okay. But let me get, I just want to, if I find something more, just so that I have it, I deal with this a fair amount, but I don't.
You can like give the stock or the funds directly, right?
Yes, you can. Yep, you can. Yes, you can do that, because that's another thing, is that you can give. So that's the other thing. So people, just to be aware, so we talk about QCDs, but it's another thing where if you're like, hey, I have a stock that maybe has let's say 3M is up 10%. So I have 3M stock, it's up 10%, but I want to give that stock to the church because they're giving to a charity. Those capital gains do not count. There's no capital gains in them. So you can give them $1,200 worth of stock. You don't have to pay the capital gains on it. So it's your way of giving to the church without having to pay those capital gains. Eventually, if you take that money out in that stock to use, it'll be that way. So you can do it that way. But if you're looking at specifically like, hey, I'm taking it out of my savings account and then putting it into an account to save for a charity, then that's where the charitable giving would be. But if specific stocks, you can do that. Yes, I know that for sure. There was another question? No, you good? You just had an itch. Just kind of put it. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys coming in on Sunday. It looks like it's sunny. It's going to start getting about 35 degrees. So try to enjoy that with all this wonderful snow. But if you do, yes.
Just want to advise folks to watch yourself in intersections, semi-controlled intersections. Still makes are awful high. Want to be careful when you stick your nose out there. You don't stick it out too fast.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So if you guys do have any other questions or anything like that, I'll be around. I can give you my email. I'm not, my job here is to give you guys education, to give you guys as much information as you can. Okay. If you guys have more questions, I am more than happy to talk further down the line, but that's why I want to do this. I appreciate Pastor Sarah giving me the opportunity to do this. I'm also on the stewardship committee too, so if you have questions about how we're doing stuff with stewardship, I'd be more than happy to talk about that. Okay? Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
I'm gonna go over that. Right. Not today.
Today. Yeah, the boys are just for the weekend. Had a blood stay. It's all in the school. So they're doing information.
It's probably okay if I.
And then.
No. Saying, if you want